You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Here in the city, there was a 26% jump in anti-Semitic crimes last year, with no less than 234 incidents, almost a dozen last month alone. Now, that's in addition to the attack on a rabbi's home in Monsey, in which 5 people were stabbed, and the shooting of a kosher market in Jersey City that left 3 people dead, plus the shooters. Joining Chief Monahan and me right now is Rabbi Marc Schneier, who for the past 30 years has been a leader in helping improve the relationship of key ethnic groups. He's a founder of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding and chief rabbi of the Hampton Synagogue. Evan Bernstein is the New York, New Jersey regional director at the Anti-Defamation League, and he is a member of the governor's Interfaith Council. Thank you for coming in and joining us. This is a serious and it's a mounting problem. Why now? Why is there such a spike in anti-Semitic crimes?
Well, I believe that's the question we're all asking, particularly with many of these crimes being perpetrated by members of the African American community. And I think that we need to examine, particularly here in New York, the relationship between the African American and Jewish communities. When you go back to the civil rights era of the 1950s and 60s, there was no segment of American society that provided as much and as consistent support to African Americans and Dr. King as did the Jewish community. And over the last 15, 20 years, Jewish and African American leaders have been working together in terms of bringing an element of cooperation to our respective communities. But this is particularly troubling, and why it is so important that African American leaders, and for that matter, leaders of all faiths and other ethnic communities, that they stand with the Jewish community as they are doing in solidarity as our communities.
Now, I know the Anti-Defamation League has come out with strong condemnation, as have leaders throughout the state and all across the country. Evan?
Yeah, I agree with the rabbi. I think there needs to be better communication. There's definitely been a breakdown over time. I think, what's been a spotlight on something that's been happening now in the New York region for quite some time. If you've looked at the last couple of years, there's been many assaults that have taken place in the community, especially the openly Orthodox Hasidic community has not had a respite. There's been almost a month-per-month assault. I think the spate that we saw over the time of Hanukkah that were bookended, as you said, with Jersey City and then Monsey, I think put more of a spotlight on something that we were already seeing as trends before. And I think there needs to be better communication. And I think there's many faces of anti-Semitism, and a lot of times people want to put everything within white supremacy. I think what's happening in our region now is not white supremacy, and there needs to be a different kind of lens put on it, and certainly different kinds of communication. I think there's gentrification issues. There are other issues that are at play here, also classic anti-Semitic stereotypes that need to be addressed, and it has to be more proactive than reactive, and I think we have not been at that stage. We're more reactive, and we can't be consistently like that.
Now, Chief, it seems to be a disparate group of people committing these crimes with expressing different grievances in the attacks that we have seen, either different grievances or nothing at all.
No, when we take a look at we break down the crimes, the anti-Semitic crimes, and we're up 47 crimes for the year, which is dramatic. It's a huge increase. It's perpetrated a lot by young children, young teenagers. That's a lot of the criminal mischief, the writing of swastikas, the yelling towards people of the Jewish faith. Also some people who are mentally challenged have been involved in some of the assaults that have taken place of people of Jewish faith. The one thing I want to get, and at least here in the city, when we take a look at the crimes that have occurred, there's only been 11 felony crimes, but 11 is way too many, where someone has committed a serious assault on someone, has robbed them, or has grabbed something from them on that person, and working hand in hand with our district attorney's office. So we've been getting consequences, and there needs to be consequences when something like this happens. So we've been getting hate crime indictments, felony indictments on those individuals, and basically we need someone to go to jail, and that's what we're working hand in hand with our prosecutors to make sure no one should ever fear go into worship someplace, to be able to dress up in their religious garb. No one should ever have that fear. And there needs to be consequences for anyone that's going to perpetrate something against them.
Now, Governor Cuomo's come out. He'd like to make these hate crimes an act of terror.
Yes. Yeah, and I think I think right now, as long as, the prosecutors and there's actual real legal ramifications in the back end, I think that's certainly the case. In Jersey City, we saw the same thing with Governor Murphy, also trying to call that an act of domestic terror. I think, certainly because just as on domestic soil, it still can be an act of terror. And I know there's been a lot of debate on that, but I think anything that's going to enhance, the sentencing and enhance the profile of these crimes is important right now.
How much of this do you think is being created by people who have actual hate and those who have mental disabilities? The people out there. I mean, there's some question about the individual in the Muncie attack, whether he actually had a motivation or he was just had a mental problem.
Listen, you have many different kinds of people, types of people committing these crimes, but we're a week out from Martin Luther King Day, and it was Dr. King who understood that a people who fight for their own rights are only as honorable as when they fight for the rights of all people. And thank God here in the city of New York, in addition to the police department, the governor, the mayor, we're blessed with community leaders that are standing in solidarity with the Jewish community. I can tell you just last week when Reverend Al Sharpton was unequivocal in denouncing these attacks, and when he first spoke to me, he was particularly disturbed that these attacks were being perpetrated by members of the African American community, and he was joined by a litany of African American ministers and civil rights leaders. That's what we need to see today. We need to see more and more leaders from other ethnic and faith communities standing in solidarity with the Jewish community.
Now, there are more of these crimes in the last couple of years than they were 4 or 5 years ago. How do you respond to the people who suggest it's the political climate right now? We had Mayor de Blasio pointing to the current administration in Washington. We had former Mayor Giuliani pointing to the mayor. You think the politics is what's behind this?
Well, today it's very chic. It's very much in vogue, to be pointing fingers. And as my friend Evan said before, there are a host of reasons as to why these anti-Semitic attacks are now coming to the fore. It could be anything from white supremacy to it could be anti-Zionism, which is only a way of couching anti-Semitism. There are a host of reasons, and we have to continue to remain vigilant. But one thing Jewish history has taught us, that casual Jews become Jewish casualties, and why we need to stand with other ethnic leaders and political leaders here in the city. Let's come together and eradicate what's going on.
You need that solidarity. I have to take a break. When we come back, let's find out what measures are being taken. I know the NYPD has ramped up its security measures. We'll talk about that when Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us.
You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Back now with Chief of the Department Terry Monahan, Rabbi Marc Schneier, and Evan Bernstein of the ADL. Anti-Semitism, this is not some new phenomenon. This goes back to biblical times. It goes back to, even in doing some of my homework, I found that Ulysses S. Grant, back in 1880 or something, during the Civil War, he banned Jews from entering Tennessee. Is that true?
First, that's true. You know the story about the Jew was accosted by an anti-Semite, and he's accused for having been responsible for sinking the Titanic. So the Jew actually looks at the anti-Semite and said, "What are you talking about? The captain wasn't even Jewish." He says, iceberg, Goldberg, it's all the same. All right, so this is not something new to the Jewish people. But what is new is the fact that we're living here in New York, we're living in the blessed United States. We're all about reaching out to others, alliance building, coalition building. There's probably no greater example of what the Anti-Defamation League continues to do in reaching out to other ethnicities and faith communities, so that it's not the Jewish people alone that need to fight this battle, but that we have many, many other wonderful partners here in New York and the U.S. to help fight this battle as well.
Now, how are we going about now combating this? I know you've ramped up some measures at the NYPD.
Yeah, listen, right after Jersey City and then increased even more after Muncie, we put a lot more resources out in our Jewish neighborhoods during service, during worship times, during synagogues, specifically in Williamsburg, Borough Park, and Crown Heights, and Flatbush, and Brooklyn, where we've had these attacks against the Jewish community. We want people not just to be safe, but they need to feel safe. They need to be able to feel that they can go to their synagogues in peace, understand that the NYPD is there for them, that we are going to be out there. It is our job to make sure people stay safe, and more importantly, that they feel safe when they go to worship.
Now, you have more security at local houses of worship in New York and the New Jersey area. What measures have you taken at your synagogue in the Hamptons?
Well, in the Hamptons, because we're so high profile, we've had this kind of security for years now. But even with a heightened security, we've only increased and enhanced the security in terms of bringing in additional security men, in terms of working locally with the police force, so that we are very, very much in a heightened sense of alert and sensitivity in terms of what is the current situation for the greater Jewish community.
Now, what advice has ADL put out for people to take measures to protect themselves against attacks?
We certainly, want every institution to kind of do their own self-evaluation. Every religious institution, whether it's a rabbi or church, has their own security needs. Their locations are very different, and I think it's impossible to put an overall blanket statement on what is best for every institution. What we do know is right now, with the climate that we're in, the institutions need to do that kind of professional evaluation to ensure that they're as secure as possible at this time. But I think everyone needs to do it on their own and bring the best experts in to do that for them.
Now, how much of these individuals, I know this is probably a psychological question, how much of these individuals are out there actually hating Jews or blacks or any other ethnic group as much as hating themselves? I guess
you're asking the rabbi.
Psychological question.
Well, of course. I mean, it's a way of making them, elevating themselves. It's a way of making them feel more important by looking, to bring down others. That's classic, not only anti-Semitism, that's an expression of Islamophobia, it's an expression of any form of racism in terms of not being able to address your own situation, trying to make yourself feel better by bringing others down.
I want to bring in, let me see if we can get this video in. I did this last June, and the people who are really impacted, everyone's impacted by these hate crimes, but you look at the people who went through the horror of the Holocaust, and they survived the Holocaust. I met several of them at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Lower Manhattan in June, and if we can, ask my producer if we could see that video. I think it's very powerful when you see and you hear what they have to say. Let's take a look at that now.
5 Jewish people with a common bond, survivors of the Holocaust whose families were among the millions lost during humanity's darkest hour. They gathered at the Museum of Jewish Heritage to view a living memorial to the Holocaust. The images rekindled thoughts of loved ones lost, Dr. Ruth Westheimer's mother and father among them.
Every time I see a picture on Auschwitz, I look if I can see my father, my grandmother, my mother, the other grandparents, and I've never found them.
Ruth Mermelstein and her sister lost 6 siblings and their parents at Auschwitz concentration camp.
I never forget and never forgive.
She still cannot shake the memory of a verbal encounter with another woman.
She showed me a pile of ashes, and she said, "This is where your parents are, your whole family."
With the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism, she is fearful lessons from the past haven't been learned.
It's very frightening to me, because this is how it started. I say, please God, you should look down and see to it, that this shouldn't happen again.
I couldn't recognize my mother. I couldn't find her in the crowd because I've never seen her without hair.
Tova Friedman survived Auschwitz because her mother hid her among corpses. Her parents survived, but 150 family members did not. Nova is fearful of the rise in incidents against the Jewish people.
I don't think people realize what hatred and prejudice can do and how far it can go. It's like a cancer. If you don't stop it right now, it'll spread.
The two survivors compare the prison numbers tattooed on their arms, and Tova recalls the kindness of a prison guard.
She said, I'm going to give you a very small number. So I was 5.5. So if you survive, you can wear a long shirt, sleeved, and you won't be ashamed of anything.
Dr. Ruth sees parallels between the past and present.
When I see pictures of children being separated from their families, it makes me cry. That's what happened to me. I waved goodbye to my family and never saw them again.
Very powerful. Final thought?
I'm a child of a Holocaust survivor. My father went through, Rabbi Arthur Schneier went through the Holocaust. But the game changer today, we're in New York, we are working with the police and other government officials.
Chief, law enforcement here and around the country will always be there to provide safety for people.
At the time of the Holocaust, we had no relation with law enforcement. The fact we're sitting here and having this conversation is so important. Thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you all for joining us, for your insight. And very important, you see something, say something. And that'll do it for our broadcast this week. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.